How's it going, guys? I am Folkaman, your local brick built historian, with another episode of Brick Built History. Today we're using the Brickmania Hawker Hurricane Mk.1 as the basis to learn about the Hawker Hurricane. So let's do a review, go into the history, and really learn about this very underrated, I'd say, aircraft. So, of course, first thing we got to start off with is the box. So you have the Hurricane Mk.1. It's called the Hawker Hurricane usually in documentation. World War II RAF fighter aircraft, 440 Lego elements, and a custom minifigure. Designed by Cody Ocell, and you got Brickmania. On the manufacturing plate, you have same information here. Brickmania kit 2307, skill level 3 out of 5. Same information over there. And then you have a forward view in a monochromatic image. So, looks pretty cool. Trying to find, oh, I have number 31. Now let's take a look at the aircraft. So, this is a very nice, beefy plane. Especially this Razorback over here, you can just hold on to it all day and just fly it around. The propeller spins freely. You have this cool brick-built exhaust on the nose here. The landing gear, I think, is probably one of the most sturdy built. You can literally just close it with your 2 fingers, so that's pretty nice. Usually, sometimes their landing gear, you have to like do one at a time, and it's a little finicky, but this one, you can just close with both fingers, and then it opens nice and wide. You have your radiator back there, and you get your nice little sticker for the tape that they put over their gun barrels. Roundel, sticker here, printed here, and then this slope, kind of like what they've been doing with their BF-109s. They would put like a pattern here. So in this case, it's like this little green splotch going across, and they would print the bottom of the roundel there, and then, or the top of the roundel, and then the bottom of it would be printed on these slopes over here. So that's pretty cool. I'm not the biggest fan of stickers. I still put them on, just, because. And then you have a sticker for the red, white, and blue stripe in the back. So it's a really nice, solid build. You can kind of just move the cockpit out of the way there if you want to get to the pilot, which is not bad at all, especially for a brick built canopy. And then you just move it back into place around him. You have this bucket handle as the forward windshield, so that's that's a good use of parts. And then you have your little antenna in the back. So overall, this is a pretty darn good kit. It's really solid. One of the things that kind of sets my OCD off is the back part of the wing here, because you have like slant, slope, slant, slope, slant, slope. Like, I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, he was able to get a good profile of the wing, but it's just like having these slopes here with the slants is kind of weird, and it definitely makes the side view kind of weird too. But other than that, sturdy, very sturdy. I can fly it around all day. Well, fly it around all day. The propeller stays on no matter how hard you hit it, so that's a positive. And overall, I think if you haven't gotten a Hurricane yet, you definitely should, because this is a fun little build, fun little kit, easy to make, a lot easier than the Spitfire, honestly. And yeah, so from there, let's go into the history of it. So going into the 1930s, Britain kind of stayed in its old ways when it comes to aircraft manufacturing. So they actually insisted on keeping biplanes for any future wars, which, as we all know nowadays, the biplane is by far obsolete, especially going into World War II. And like they'd still use biplanes, especially with the Fairley Swordfish, probably their most famous biplane they used during World War II, and actually probably the most famous biplane used during World War II, and that was a torpedo bomber. But they originally wanted to keep their fighters, keep their bombers. I'm not sure, but I know for a fact they wanted to keep their fighters biplanes, because they thought that the biplane, you'd get more maneuverability, even though speed could be compromised. You get that maneuverability that you can't just be beaten in a dogfight. Well, it eventually took some convincing in the making of this aircraft to basically have Britain, the Ministry of Defense, go, maybe we should go with a monoplane. So the lead designer is, his name is Sidney Cam, and he's been a designer with Hawker for a little bit at this point, and he basically tried to push this cantilever monoplane design to the Ministry of Defense for a couple of years, maybe like 10 years, until in the 1930s with a specification F.7 /30, where the ministry finally gave in to allow him to make this. It's really interesting, the fact that we think that Britain was kind of like hoping to get a monoplane design or something, because everyone else, America, Germany, all of them, they were working on their all-metal monoplane designs at this point. The BF-109 was coming out, the monoplane design was starting to be adopted by everyone else at this point, but Britain was starting to fall behind the curve. And it took the insistence of a guy who kept on making monoplane designs for the entries before the ministry finally decided, okay, we'll go with a monoplane design. So this would be introduced in December of 1937, and one of the things about it that really was appealing is that this was really easy to manufacture. And in fact, a majority of this aircraft is wood and canvas, kind of like or linen, kind of like the old World War I biplanes and the interwar aircraft of the time. But wood and canvas was still being used, and it's still used throughout the entire war, especially in Russia. Russia had a lot of wooden planes, mostly because they didn't have the proper amount of workers to manipulate metal good enough for aircraft, but that's beyond the point. But the Hawker Hurricane with the wood and linen made it really, really easy to manufacture. And it also only cost, at the time, 4,000 pounds to produce in 1939. So it's really quite an inexpensive, easy to make aircraft. And by the end of the war, they built 14,487 of these, which is pretty darn good. I know it's 6,000 short of the IL-2, or 8,000 short of the IL-2, and that was the most produced aircraft of the war. So 14,000 $14,500 is nothing to scoff at. And that's because this thing was really easy to build, really quick to make, and it cost quite significantly less than some say a Spitfire, because that thing is all metal. So, you know, it's got its ups and it's got its downs. Some of the downs is that it's an old design. You know, going into World War II, like the Spitfire started coming out in the late 30s. This was in early to mid 30s design. So when the Spitfire came out, it was a much newer aircraft, although a lot of people still believe that the Hawker Hurricane was a lot better than the Spitfire. Whenever it came out in the Mark 1, as we see here, it had a Rolls-Royce Merlin Mark II V12 liquid-cooled engine. As you can see, V12 engine, and this is whenever they were using collective exhausts. So most engines, most World War II fighter engines, the pistons just straight piped out, so you'd have 12 exhausts. But the British, they combined their exhausts 2 at a time to make a 3-port exhaust coming out the side. They eventually stopped this because it turned out there was absolutely zero benefit from it. So why waste the metal in making a 3-port exhaust whenever you can have a pure straight pipe? It had roughly 10,000 or 1,030 horsepower, so it's not too bad. And well, actually, in fact, the Merlin is probably one of the best aircraft engines in the entire war. Either that or the Griffin. But it had a max speed of 340 miles per hour and a range of 600 miles. So it's not too bad, especially for an early 30s design. The Mark 1 was the first Hawker to actually have this 3-blade propeller. The originals had a 2-blade wooden propeller, and then a 2-blade non-variable pitch propeller, meaning that, or a static pitch propeller, if you want to make it simple, meaning that instead of having a system to change the pitch of the prop whenever you're going, say you want to go faster or slower or whatever, you have the prop stuck at one pitch. So in order to change speed, you have to change the speed of the engine, which one puts wear and tear on the engine, constantly changing its speed and all that, and two, you don't have the ability to maximize the proper pitch for, say, whatever altitude you're at or whatever speed you want to go. So whenever it went from the originals to the Mark 1s, it was vastly improved having this 3-bladed propeller. Now, another thing that the Hawker Hurricane would introduce into British service was retractable landing gear, meaning that the landing gear, like I mentioned before, goes up into the fuselage. Now, retractable landing gear is something that is debated about through all the countries, whether it's truly needed or not. Aircraft like the Junkers Stuka or the Aichi D3A Val had fixed landing gear. I think I mentioned in my 109 video that the Focke-Wulf was a biplane with fixed landing gear because they thought that the complexity of having retractable landing gear was just not worth it. At this point, in early to mid 30s, retractable landing gear was a pretty new concept. No one really knew how well it would work or how reliable it was. But Sidney Cam decided to put the retractable landing gear in his aircraft, and voila, it turns out to be pretty nice. Unfortunately for the Hawker, it would stopped production in July of 1944. So didn't quite reach the end of the war in production. It would go through many modifications, many different variants. The Mk.1 has the 8 303 Browning machine guns in the wings. Later variants would have 50s, 50 caliber machine guns and 20 millimeter cannons and all that, and different variations depending on what mark it is. So it's just like the Spitfire. Like the Mk.1 Spitfire had 8 303s along the wing. As it progressed and developed, it went through a bunch of different changes, having 50 calibers, having 20 millimeters, and so on and so forth. There's so many variations that I would be here forever. But the thing is that the Hawker Hurricane is kind of just forgotten. It's like the 190 of the Focke-Wulf 190 of Britain. People don't really think about it too much. Whenever you think of British aircraft or aircraft from the RAF during World War II, everyone immediately thinks Spitfire. That's what you think of. Hey, what aircraft fought in World War II for Britain? Spitfire. Easy. But the Hawker Hurricane really proved to be its own. It was a really good, reliable, rugged aircraft. It was easy to manufacture. It was easy to maintain. The ground crews loved it. The pilots loved it. It's basically just a British Focke-Wulf 190, except the difference is this was made early and the 190 was made later, but I digress. But yeah, this was probably one of the most underrated aircraft of Britain besides the Beaufighter, and it truly, I think, deserves its own limelight, because this thing was part of what really was British aviation. This thing without this, the Spitfire wouldn't exist. No one would, the British ministry would not have decided to go with the Spitfire if it wasn't for the Hawker. So, there's that as well. But either way, Hawker Hurricane, beautifully recreated by Brickmania, and I think this is probably a really good kit to get, and it's even better when you have a Spitfire to go with it. It's even better when you have an MU-109 to go against it, and it's a lot better if you have a Ju-88 for it to go against. So, with that said, hopefully you learned something, hopefully you enjoyed, and if you liked it, hit a like. If you think I missed something, or if you just want to comment what you learned, go ahead and comment what you want to see. I have a lot of different tanks, aircraft, trucks, all that. There's a lot that I need to go over, and a lot that will be done. So if you want to see something be done earlier, tell me. But with that said, subscribe if you want. I've been Folkerman, and this is me continuing to build a history.